Dobrý den, dámy a pánové. Vítám vás u dalšího pokračování našeho cyklu Zelená, odolná, chytrá a inkluzivní města. Ten jsme pro vás připravili ve spolupráci s Asociací pro rozvoj infrastruktury, Svazem měst a obcí České republiky a Českou podnikatelskou radou pro udržitelný rozvoj. Vítám Petra Kalaše, viceprezidenta České podnikatelské rady pro udržitelný rozvoj. Dneska si budeme povídat s inspirativní osobností mezinárodního věhlasu Jonathanem Wootliffem. A Petře, vy se s Jonathanem znáte dlouhá léta?
Znám se s tím dlouhá léta a velmi dobře. Výborně. Tomáši, děkuji za úvod. Zdravím i já všechny jménem Podnikatelské rady pro udržitelný rozvoj ke sledování dnešního webináře. Je první v nové sérii připravovaných webinářů zaměřených na setkávání s významnými národními i mezinárodními proponenty konceptu udržitelného rozvoje a přidružených témat. Princip udržitelného rozvoje, který propojuje rovnováhu ekonomického, sociálního a environmentálního rozvoje v čase, je nosným rozvojovým konceptem Evropské unie a odráží se i v nové zelené dohodě Evropské unie. Je pevně zakotven v národních strategiích a politikách řady evropských států, včetně Švýcarska, a u nás je zakotven na úrovni Rady vlády pro udržitelný rozvoj, která zarámovala tento vývoj strategií udržitelného rozvoje České republiky do roku 2030 a připravila i akční program. I když koncept udržitelného rozvoje v České republice není ještě plně zakotven, již řada korporací, měst a obcí a bankovní sektor, včetně obyvatelstva, přistupuje na tento koncept svých rozvojů. Česká podnikatelská rada byla založena v roce 2014 a je součástí Světové podnikatelské rady a je zaměřená na podporu principu udržitelnosti mezi svými členy, velkými i menšími českými korporacemi. Propojením se Světovou podnikatelskou radou přinášíme do České republiky mezinárodní trendy, které se týkají rozvojových biznisových tendencí v oblastech, jako je třeba čistá energetika, čistá mobilita, chytrá a odolná města, oběhové hospodářství a nově i post-covidová strategie. K dnešnímu pohovoru jsme si na téma udržitelného rozvoje pozvali Jonathana Wootliffa, významného a dlouhodobého člena naší České podnikatelské rady. Jonathan je Brit, žijící dlouhou dobu v České republice, věnující se dlouhodobě prosazováním modelu biznisové udržitelnosti a řešení konfliktů v mezinárodním korporátním prostředí mezi firmami a nevládními organizacemi. Původním zaměřením a profesí byl žurnalista, pak přešel do poradenské oblasti a pracoval pro řadu společností a velkých firm ve Velké Británii a Spojených státech. Později jako ředitel pro komunikaci v GREENPEACE působil se svým týmem několika desítek členů a spolupracovníků ve 35 zemích. Po odchodu z GREENPEACE se Jonathan etabloval jako nezávislý konzultant pro mezinárodní firmy, a kde staví mosty s nevládními organizacemi pro řešení případných konfliktů a pracuje převážně v rozvojových zemích. Rovněž radí v oblasti filantropických projektů a připravuje programy v oblasti korporátní sociální odpovědnosti. V rozvojovém světě pracoval na četných rozvojových projektech. V rámci České podnikatelské rady zastává místo předsedy týmu poradců a iniciuje řadu programů a projektů s propojením na Světovou podnikatelskou radu. Interview s Jonathanem Wootliffem provede kolega Tomáš a bude v anglické verzi.
Jonathan Wootlif, thank you very much for coming to studio.
Thank you for having me.
How are you these days?
I'm fine, thank you.
I'd like to thank Peter Kalash, who introduced you generally. I'm really excited having you here. I run the Czech Infrastructure Association. We have about 50 members, and we profile as a think tank for the Czech infrastructure. And our members are engineers, construction firms, bank, consultants, and other institutions. And our goal is to improve a way how the Czech infrastructure and also this transport, social, and the city infrastructure is being designed, built, financed, and operate. That's sort of the main topic. And honestly, the climate change and sustainability is quite a new topic for us within the infrastructure sector. I think it's being discussed. There's a new programming period from the European Union starting this year, and it's actually being big topic. So I have lots of questions for you, and I'm really eager to hear your responses. You were in the past communication director in GREENPEACE International, and nowadays you work primarily with the private companies. But we will get back to it later. You lived and worked all over the world in 38 countries around the globe. And how long have you been in the Czech Republic?
I've lived here for 15 years. I've actually lived in 7 different countries, lived and worked in 7 different countries, but I work internationally, so I've actually done projects in 38 countries in the world. Okay, so you are the one who can compare how the Czech Republic or the CE region, Central European region, how do we get by, how we take care of our environment and cities and nature compared to the other places in the world? Can you sort of comment? Certainly. I mean, different countries are at different levels of awareness and concern, and different countries are at different levels of awareness, often because of the political perspective in that country. If you looked at the United States last year, you would imagine that the US had no interest in climate change because the president then said that climate change was a hoax. A year on, Joe Biden, the president, says that climate change is the most important single issue to face mankind. So therefore, it's not surprising that you have different perspectives depending on the leadership. In this country, the last president, President Klaus, wrote a book that said that climate change was a hoax, and the title of the book was that environmentalists are worse than communists. So it's not surprising during that time that there would be some, at least, opinion that would think that people like me were not talking sense. We are. Climate change is real, it matters, and it may be better to follow the science rather than the politicians.
Okay, thank you. The climate change, the most common 4 questions I hear within the Czech Republic is they are really simple ones. Will climate change have any significant impact on us in the Czech Republic or CE, Middle Europe region?
Climate change doesn't have any borders. Climate change affects all of us. Climate change is like COVID. If in India there is a severe outbreak of COVID, this will impact all of us. It's a chain reaction. In this part of the world where we don't have any coastlines, it's not so much the seas and the oceans that we should be concerned about, but for example, the water table. The water table is lower than it ever has been in recorded history. And it is quite possible that within the next 5 years, the government will be forced to impose water rationing. If I told you that the government would impose any restrictions on our behavior a year ago, it would be hard to imagine it. But now, as a consequence of COVID, we realize that governments sometimes have to act urgently. If we don't fix the problem of climate change, we will find everything becomes more expensive and life becomes much harder. And in particular, there will be a great shortage of water in Central Europe. There already is. Of course, we know about natural disasters in the Czech Republic. In 2002, the water levels were so high that about a third of the country was affected by river flooding. And it was a catastrophe which cost billions of Czech crowns to fix.
Okay, thank you. Well, the second question, I hear that we, as a small country in the middle of the Europe, do we really have to take any steps? Can we save the world from this part of as a small country?
Well, it's a chain, and the weakest link in a very strong chain is the strength of that chain. And we all have to play our role in this, because if we don't, we will not solve the problem. The maths is quite simple. We know that carbon dioxide and another number of other greenhouse gases, which can be measured, are the cause of global warming, of climate change, and that we have to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and actually decarbonize society within about 30 years if we are to keep the temperature levels within the 1.5 degrees that the scientists say that we have to in order to achieve some equilibrium. Now, in order to do that, each country has its own carbon and greenhouse gas budget. Every country is emitting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and if you do the maths, you can make a cake, if you like, with a pie chart. And of course, the Czech Republic is a small country, but nevertheless it represents a certain percentage of the greenhouse gases which are emitted. And if each country makes a commitment to go to carbon zero and has a very strict timeline for doing that, then we will see a reduction in carbon emissions. There is no way that we can expect one country to reduce its carbon emissions and then for another country to say it's not our problem. This is an equal opportunity for every country, and it's an equal challenge for every country. And I say opportunity because this is not a sacrifice, this is a big chance for economic growth. Because as we transition from fossil fuels, which is the primary way that we are generating power, as we transition from these traditional fuels into renewables, into renewable energy, we will all benefit from that, and industry will benefit enormously because there will be a huge number of jobs in the technology that will be and is available now for converting from old-fashioned forms of power generation into the very modern new forms of power generation that we have already and that will only develop in a very exciting way in the years to come.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking about infrastructure, especially public infrastructure like transport, social, city infrastructure, in Czech Republic it takes quite a long time. It's like 10 to 15 years to prepare and get all the permits and actually start construction. So I mean, it's a really long time, and then it's one of the big chunks of the investments that the state does, generally probably not just in the country. But there's discussion that sustainable infrastructure is going to be more expensive. Is it myth, or is it true? Is it worth to invest more in this sustainable infrastructure?
Well, we have to develop sustainable infrastructure. We absolutely have to. I don't believe that it's more expensive. I think it's a different way of doing things, and it will create jobs, create new technological challenges, and therefore there will be exciting new businesses, new enterprises, new industries that will evolve out of this. Let's take, for example, the development since the revolution in this country. Most of the transportation infrastructure in this country, the public investment has been in roads. This was very expensive, but it was politically very popular. It was a mistake, because every road in this country, which was built 20 years ago as a beautiful, nice, wide road, is now so full of traffic that the average Czech is very used to spending time sitting on these magnificent roads in traffic jams. The fact that most people use their cars on their own every day, and then the cars are sitting on the sides of the roads afterwards for most of their life, it doesn't make any sense and is a much more costly venture than developing infrastructure where we are sharing the transportation, in other words, public transportation. And so finally, we are seeing this country invest in rail travel. Significant amounts will, in the next 10, 15 years, be spent on rail travel. Of course, the costs are high, but the returns will be much, much higher than that. People will save enormous amounts of time in terms of travel. And if you save time, you save money. And there is nothing more appealing than traveling by train, when you can work on the train and you can talk on the train and you can eat on the train and you can travel so much faster and get from A to B much faster than you can by car. So a modern infrastructure, of course, costs money. Any change costs money. But if it brings improvements, that also will bring financial savings and financial opportunities.
Well, it's good to hear. Well, the Czech Republic at the moment is in a stage where we are planning and designing our future national high-speed rail network. It's going to be about 600 kilometers, newly dedicated lines, newly built dedicated lines. And what we try as an association push that we focus on not just on the investment costs, which we believe that they are generally pushed to be as low as possible. I think we should focus on the life cycle cost, with the view of not just the building, but operating, maintaining the infrastructure for 30 years. And that will be the discussion which we already had, that the cost, for example, for the insurance might be increasing as well in the future if we have a more unstable weather, extreme weather, and so on. So I believe that this discussion is going to take place in the Czech Republic, and you'll be definitely welcome to be part of it. Another question, the last one, from the simple ones, but difficult to answer probably for me, it's that there is a perception or a feeling that actually the European Union is pushing us in these steps of the sustainability.
Well, this is a nonsense. We are the European Union. Nothing is being told to us. We are a member, as the Czech Republic, of a club, of a group of 27 countries that have equal power of veto, equal votes. And this country, and the Ministry of Environment in this case, contributes its best thinking to legislation which is collectively discussed and then voted on. There is no imposition from Brussels. This is a collective decision, and the Czech Republic and the Czech government is just as responsible for any of this legislation as is Germany, as is France, as is Portugal, as is Malta. So this is a myth, and one which sometimes politicians choose to use to hide behind the truth. The reality is that climate change is extremely urgent. It's an issue that we should have addressed years ago. We first identified the problem 50 years ago. The White House in the United States, under the President Eisenhower's administration, had its first emergency meeting in 1957 on the subject of atmospheric change, when there were less than 2 billion people living on the planet. And it was forecast that within the next 30 years, if we did not act urgently back in the 1950s, we would pay a very heavy price, cost-wise, in terms of livelihoods and in terms of lives, and the quality of life and health, and mortality rates would increase if we did not address it. In that period of time, we failed to address it, but we increased the population from less than 2 billion to now nearly 8 billion, and there will be 10 billion people within the next 5 years. This is something that is urgent, that needs to be addressed. It's not coming from the European Union, it's coming from science. And the politicians are simply playing catch-up on what scientists have known for a long time. And you know, sometimes when the doctor gives you a pill which you don't like the taste of, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taking that pill. Sometimes things which don't taste very good or treatments which don't feel very good are absolutely essential. But the outcome will be a very good one. And do not believe any politicians who tell you that we're being told to do this. We are a part of the problem, and we are a part of the solution. And the Czech Republic has very fine scientists who are contributing to finding the solutions as much as that is happening from other countries in the world.
Okay, thank you. Well, this interview is a part of series of panel discussion interviews and webinars called Green, Smart, Resilient and Inclusive Cities, which we actually do with the Union of Towns. We do this year. And speaking about the politicians, well, we tend generally blame the government, but what the role of the Czech cities and municipalities would be in fighting the climate change? What can they do something on their behalf, by themselves?
Well, everybody can play a role, of course, and I think that local government has a very important role to play in this. All decision makers and anybody who is in a position, all institutions that have an opportunity to contribute need to do so. At the local level, transportation decisions, the layout of cities are generally decided. And what we need a race to the top. So if we can have a competition where different cities want to be the winners in terms of having the smartest cities, this is the ideal opportunity. And we have some very enlightened mayors and other leading politicians in different parts of the country, not least of which in Prague, who see an opportunity for their cities. And really, there are tables which show which are the smartest cities in the world. And we have some very fine examples in this country, including Prague, which is very highly rated. And this will attract inward investment, it will attract foreign companies, and it will attract people to come and live there. So the role of local authorities and local municipalities is absolutely critical.
Okay, thank you. Well, back to your life, to your past. Can you share with us some of your key learnings from Greenpeace and how you transition it in the role of how you transitioned in the role of the corporate advisor? Because I would assume that Greenpeace and corporations are not really sitting on the same side of the table.
Actually, you'll be surprised how often corporations and Greenpeace do sit on the same same side of the table. The reality is we're all in this planet together. We only have one. And once we understand the science and we're on the same page as far as seeing what we need to do, then we all are on the same side and we need to find solutions collaboratively rather than through confrontation. And although many of the headlines that Greenpeace creates through its actions appear as though there's confrontation, in reality, most of the work which is done by Greenpeace and the other environmental NGOs is collaborative, is working with business and working with government in order to find joint solutions. The problem is that you sometimes have to give people a little bit of a kick up the backside in order to encourage them to actually take things seriously. Most profound change throughout the history of the world hasn't happened because people are lying down. Most profound change happens because there are visionaries, people who understand an issue better than others, and they have to fight for it. And the environmental movement, the modern environmental movement, is something like 60 years old, and without it, we would be living in a far worse world. As environmentalists, we are able to see beyond our imagination limits. People have limits to their imagination. They don't look beyond the day or the week or the month or the year, or in the case of politicians, they look to the next election and not beyond that. Environmentalists understand the science and can see that we have to take a long-term vision. Business sometimes thinks that environmentalism will cost too much money, will increase the cost of their business and therefore reduce their opportunity to make money. Smart environmentalism is about explaining to business that there are many more opportunities than there are downsides, and that, first of all, we need to live in a world that's stable. We've learned from the last 12 months that nature really can interrupt our lives in a very significant way. The climate crisis hasn't yet happened, and when it does, or if it does, it will be far more severe than anything which we are experiencing with the current pandemic. We understand now what nature can actually do, and we understand why we need to try very hard to prevent things from happening. When I was at Greenpeace, we were, yes, sometimes fighting against governments and sometimes fighting against companies in order to get them to understand what they needed to do. But once we broke through this imagination gap, we were able to very constructively sit down and talk about solutions. And the transition is enormous. First of all, let's have a look at young people. We have a big, big divide here. There is no one under 20 who you would need to persuade that environmentalism is a priority. There are no young people who don't fully understand the need for us to nurture nature, to look after this planet, and to be more respectful to nature. This is clear. This is clear whenever I'm talking to young people. It's seen as though the old people don't respect the planet and that the old people don't care about the future of the young. That's a very divisive situation that we're in. But the reality is that we are starting to see many companies, many leading companies, global companies and Czech companies that have very, very imaginative and innovative leaders who are actually saying, we are going to take this matter seriously and we're going to do something about it, and we're going to respect the environment, we're going to respect nature, and we're going to contribute to finding solutions, and that by creating a better world, this is going to be better for our business, it's going to be better for economics, it's going to be better for everything. And we see this big, big transition. If we go back 30 years ago, the oil companies, for example, were all opposing the whole concept of having to do anything to mitigate climate change. They were all opposing the idea that we should wean ourselves off of fossil fuel because they were looking in a black and white way. Oil made them money. No oil, they wouldn't make any money. Now, if you look at the oil companies, they are the leaders in renewable technology investment. And oil companies don't even call themselves oil companies anymore. They are now energy companies. They're providing energy solutions. And if you look at all of them, from Exxon, who used to be the biggest block towards any progress on this subject, and you look at BP and you look at Shell, you look at all these companies, you will see that they are absolutely leading the transition into a whole new economy. This is a new industrial revolution. When the first industrial revolution came along, the world was very afraid of it, and there were many people who resisted it. We now live in the consequences of the first industrial revolution, where we benefited enormously, but we also have paid a very heavy price for the fuel that we've used. Now, the second industrial revolution will transition into something much cleaner. We will not be sacrificing anything. We will be traveling as much. We will be traveling more. We will be traveling faster and further and more frequently than ever before. We'll be doing it in a greener and in a cleaner way, which will bring us all enormous benefits. And when I was at Greenpeace, the struggle always seemed to be worth it, because you push, you find resistance, and then people give way because they realize and they understand. So Greenpeace is an organization, like other environmental organizations, that tries to break down this imagination fence so that people can see what opportunities lie ahead. And Greenpeace and other organizations, I believe, have been very successful in doing that. It's a struggle. It's a long road. You don't solve these problems immediately.
Well, thank you. I think you, in what you said, you hit the nail on the head. You mentioned that, or in my view, it's hard to find sustainable politicians. Politicians live in 4-year cycles from election to election. So is it why the private sector is going to be important for the sustainable development?
Yes. My attraction to working with the private sector or advising the private sector is precisely because I believe in capitalism as the solution to environmental challenges. Maybe that sounds strange as an environmentalist, but it's not. Politicians can provide frameworks, they can provide legislation, but if you really think about it, legislative bodies are reactive. They are never innovative. Legislation is passed as a consequence of human behavior, human activity. It is not at the forefront of change. It is a reactive process. If we depend on our politicians to come up with new ideas, forget about it. It wasn't politicians who created the internet or Google or any of the brilliant things, or aircraft or unbelievable technologies. It was brilliant people who were driven by setting goals. And businesses are the greatest innovators in the world. They have the money, they have the talent, they have the vision to do that. Politicians can provide the framework, but let's not expect politicians to lead on innovation. And so the solutions are only going to come from business, because business, as you know, from an infrastructural development perspective, look at 30, 50-year plans. When they make commitments, they know how they are going to do it. They don't make false promises because they don't have constituents who they need to tell things which are not always exactly the truth. They know how much money they've got. They know where they can raise the money from. Essentially, all businesses are engineering entities, not necessarily mechanical engineering, but intellectual engineering. And they set out with a goal, and once they have made a commitment, they invariably achieve it, because they have completely different ways of measuring success. Politicians have, as you say, short-term, often 4 or 5 year cycles, and they're just looking to winning the next election. And it's very hard to win elections by telling people that we're going to introduce 30-year plans. It's not very popular with the people. And so, unfortunately, we have a lot of politicians, particularly these days, who don't follow convictions, they don't follow beliefs, but they follow short-term opinion polls. We cannot depend on politicians, but we can depend on companies, and companies are doing great things in this area. And I actually sometimes say that it will be accountants who will save the world, it will be accountancy that will save the planet, because it's about mathematics. If you have stability and you have good, stable economies, then companies will make more money. And you can only have good, stable economies if you have healthy environments in which people are going to live. So you have to have healthy breath, you have to have the ability to be able to breathe in fresh air and drink clean water. You know, Africa is the most underdeveloped country on earth. 1 in 5 children don't live to the age of 5 in Africa. Imagine if that wasn't the case. Imagine if life expectancy in Africa was as it is in our part of the world. Imagine how great that would be for business. Imagine if you could increase and improve people's lives, how good that would be for business. There's a strong business case for doing this. And the reason why 1 in 5 children in Africa don't make it to the age of 5 is because of an absence of clean water and fresh air. And that's a very extreme example, but exactly the same exists here, is that the biggest reason for health problems in Europe are all as a consequence of our relationship with nature and our struggle to make the places in which we live healthier.
Okay, thank you. So in my understanding, the current activities, documents, for example, like European Green Deal and EU taxonomy, I understand that these documents are actually released to unite our understanding. They are reactive. They are not.
Well, I consider them to be. I consider them to be reactive, and I'll tell you why. I first went to the International United Nations Climate Change Summit in Kyoto over 20 years ago, at which there were many thousands of delegates. Almost every country in the world was represented there. And at that time, it was already announced by the world's leading scientists that the problem was man-made, and that climate change, which is the mother of all environmental challenges, and it's our biggest single challenge as humankind, this is real and that we need to address it. It's only in the last 10, 15 years that the European Union has strongly focused on climate change. It's only since Paris, the Paris Agreement, just 4 years ago, that these aggressive, ambitious, important targets were set. So of course it's reactive, and it's not really enough. It's a complete mistake for the Czech Republic to somehow believe that we are being dragged into this without wanting it. If you talk to enlightened business leaders in this country, and I am very involved with the Czech Business Council for Sustainable Development, where some leading businesses participate and are members of this. We are the chapter of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. If you talk to these enlightened business leaders, they understand how important this is and have a commitment to go way beyond the legislative requirements. And the imaginative businesses, leading businesses in this country, are already making commitments to well exceed the targets that are being set by the European Union and by the Czech government. And this isn't because they have to, because clearly they only have to follow the law, but it's because they want to, because they can see that it's good for long-term business. You know, businesses don't exist to save the world. Businesses exist to make money. And when you start to see that it's business leaders who are arguing with politicians and saying, we need faster change, we need stricter legislation, we need to be pushed more as a society, they're not doing this because they want to save the planet. They're doing it because they want to make money. And they recognize that if they save the planet, they can make more money. So it's in that order that business criteria is they do what's good for business. And it's clear by any measure of all these sophisticated businesses that they recognize that environmental protection is good for business. It's not a sacrifice, it's an opportunity. This is how people need to look at it.
Okay, thank you. I'm aware that in the UK there was a public consultations with the large companies, industry companies, discussing when would be sort of the date when the certain goals would be made in terms of the sustainability and climate change, and especially the carbon, and the so-called the oil companies like BP, for example, they were actually those ones who advocated for putting the date actually forward to make it the change, make it faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why such company? Is it because of the risks? The more you keep the risk that the change is coming, is it for the business important?
You know, when we are told that something can happen in the future that's bad, human nature generally blocks it out, and we don't really believe it. You know, if the doctor tells you that if you continue to eat the way you do, in 10 years' time you will have a heart attack, it's very hard to believe them, and you kind of put it away. But if you are a business and you have access and real understanding of the science, and you're employing real experts, just like government, and you really see the problem and you really understand it, then you need to push for faster change. It's very difficult when you're communicating environmental issues to attract people's imagination. If you make them fear too much, they are paralyzed and they do nothing. So you have to offer them hope. The reality is that business is very fearful, and politicians, truthfully, are very fearful, because we know that if we don't act yesterday, if we don't act immediately, and we don't make the targets for decarbonization more ambitious, then we will pay an enormously heavy price in the future. Maybe after we've retired or after we have passed on, but that our children will not see the kind of world that we've enjoyed, and that we will struggle in many parts of the world to run economies anyway like the one that we would like to. And so the reason why business is pushing for more ambitious targets, the reason why business is pushing to reduce the use of carbon, the emission of carbon, to reduce our use of fossil fuel and to eventually move to full renewable energy, is because they know what the consequences are. And the consequences are so severe that we will leave for our children a world that will be far less pleasant than the one that we have now, and far less stable.
Well, let's focus on the business and sustainability. Does sustainability has any business case?
Sustainability is what business is all about. It's all pure economics, isn't it? Is that sustainability is about a business that what it does today will help with its endurance in the future. And sustainability is, if you like, the invention of the business world. That's what sustainability is about. It's about successful business. And the way that sustainability now exists is that it's been expanded beyond just profit. So we're looking at 3 Ps, which companies, business is embracing. The profit, because you can't do anything if you don't make a profit. So that's an essential element of sustainability. The people, you can't do anything if you have unhappy workforce, if you're treating people badly, if you don't have satisfied customers, if you don't have healthy, happy communities in which you operate. And planet. If you, as a business, disregard the planetary boundaries and pollute the planet and damage it, then you also don't have a sustainable business. And so a business needs to be sustainable in order to survive. And for it to survive sustainably, it stands on three equal pillars: people, planet, and profit. And I stress that all those three have to be looked at in equal measure. If you compromise on profit and you go bankrupt, then you don't have a business. If you compromise on people, then you don't have a business. If you compromise on the environment, you don't have a business. So sustainability is at the center of business planning and business success.
Do you believe, personally, that the capitalism can be responsible in long term in terms of the climate change and sustainability?
I absolutely do. I believe that responsible capitalism is the solution. As I said before, that accountants could arguably save the world. Why is this? The biggest incentive to people who go to work, of course, they want to enjoy their jobs, that's for sure. But the biggest incentive is their financial reward. It gives them independence, it gives them the opportunity of buying things and so on. And if you're rewarded because you are you can make more money out of it, then that will be a big attraction. And in the capitalist society, companies increase value primarily through the stock markets. Large companies are publicly listed on actually hundreds of stock markets around the world. And the way that money, the way that wealth is accumulated, and the way that all of our pensions and our personal financial stability is created and secured is through the capital markets. And what we're seeing, particularly in the last year, is that we're seeing that the companies that have been doing the best, the ones that have increased their share value, are the ones that have demonstrated their ability to adapt, to be flexible, to be resilient, and to think to the future and be flexible. And what we're looking at is that we're looking at companies really taking center stage now and looking incredibly attractive in the eyes of the populations, precisely because they're driven by the capital markets. So capitalism can be the biggest force for responsible business. And we're starting to see this now very significantly. There's a relatively new concept which investment institutions and the financial world is embracing, which is known as ESG, environment, social, and governance. This is the same as my 3 Ps of people, planet, profit, but the financial world has adopted this ESG approach. And we're starting to see an increasing number of ratings where companies are rated by their ESG performance. So on the New York Stock Exchange, on the London Stock Exchange, on stock exchange throughout Europe, there are sustainability indices where companies are actually measured not just by their profit, but also by their people and planetary regard and their respect for them. I'm going to give you an example of why responsible capitalism is so attractive. In this country, you still have a situation where women are not equal to men in the workplace. It's a scandal and one which the government should be ashamed of. The idea that in large companies in this country, you find that the entire board are of men is a nonsense. It's not just an equality issue, but it's an opportunity issue. 50% of the population are women. How can you produce products that will be successful in your markets if your company is only being driven by men. So responsible capitalism is pushing companies because of the profit motive to increase opportunities for women so that you have gender equality, because that will help you make more money. So I have no problem in waving the carrot of money in front of business to say, if you act responsibly, you will make more money. And you see this time and time again on the New York Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchanges, that businesses which have larger numbers of women in leadership positions do better. So responsibility, social responsibility, environmental responsibility, and financial responsibility in equal measure are really driven by the need to participate successfully in the capitalist society. So yeah, capitalism can be very good for our future.
Well, I have two last questions, and the first one is, what is the stakeholders' engagement? And if you can explain the sort of expression, the stakeholder, what it means, and what would be the role of the NGOs?
Yes. So this, of course, is a subject very close to my heart, because coming from the NGO world, where we at times, as I mentioned earlier, were battling with companies, but also collaborating with companies, that, you know, for a business to exist and to succeed, it needs to be a part of society, not living in a bubble, in a nice, big, posh, nice, elegant office building with double or triple glazing and not understanding and participating in what's going on outside. NGOs, there are thousands of NGOs. There are hundreds of thousands of NGOs, but there are thousands of them in this country. Some are very big, a small number are very big, and some are very small. And they all represent different interests, whether it's looking after the interests of the disabled or single parents or some environmental issue or the homeless or any of these things. For companies to succeed in society, they need to understand what society is about. They need to try to help society to be successful, because this will help them. Companies also need to address and meet expectations that society has. You can only understand what those expectations are by speaking with, listening to, by engaging with NGOs, because they represent all the different aspects of society. And sometimes you have to sit down with people who you think may be very difficult and may not be the easiest partners to discuss or find solutions with. Often those are the most important ones. The ones that are pushing you to go beyond your comfort area will eventually make you an even better and more successful company and give you a great competitive edge over the others. So a very central part of having a sustainability strategy is engagement with society, is engagement with civil society through these NGOs, and by a willingness not just to tell them what you're doing, but to listen. You know, the companies of the past, if we go back to 89 and the beginning of, you know, the modern economy post-revolution in this country, it was, let's take the analogy of advertising. We spend a lot of money advertising and we'll tell everybody how great our products are. Not listening, just telling. If you actually sit down and listen, you will end up being able to develop better products, better services, and come up with new ideas, because you are a part of society rather than above it, looking down and just telling them what to do. The stakeholder engagement is the heart of it. And you know, one of the most exciting things that I've done in stakeholder engagement, in helping companies, to engage with NGOs was 2 years ago now. I brought members of the school pupils organization, Fridays for the Future, together to meet with 10 chief executives to talk about climate change. These chief executives, had no problem meeting with politicians, no problem meeting with difficult trade unions, legislative authorities and so on. But they were really quite afraid of the idea of sitting down with 15, 16-year-olds. Why was that? Because they were afraid that they would actually have to have real conversations with real people who would actually have the confidence to tell them what they really thought of them, and they did. And it was some of the most interesting discussions, and I can tell you that all those CEOs who were involved, they remember that meeting and have acted on it more significantly than on anything else in their careers. So stakeholder engagement is unbelievably beneficial to everybody.
So you have a faith in the young generation?
Well, we have to, don't we? I certainly have faith in the young generation. I don't have any faith in my generation. It's my birthday today.
Really?
Yes, and I'm past it. We need the young people, right? And without them, there is no future. And it's about time that instead of, I'm a parent and a grandparent, I'm much more interested in listening to what they've got to tell me than I am in telling them what I think, because I learn much more from them than they do from me.
Okay, today I promise that I will tell my kids, who are boys 14, 16, that they are going to save the world with the others, sort of within the generation. With the last question, I'm aware that you have plans for the Czech Republic. Can you tell us more about your projects?
Certainly. Through the Czech Business Council for Sustainable Development, we are launching a new initiative which is called, in English, Project Rethink. Now is the time to rethink how business can contribute to the world as we emerge from the current crisis. The biggest obstacle to change, in my experience, and the biggest obstacle for getting companies to truly embrace sustainability has been, but we cannot disrupt business as usual. Yes, we understand we need to change, but let's do it very slowly. This argument no longer stands because there is no such thing as business as usual. The whole world has been turned upside down. So there's an immensely attractive opportunity right now to say, as we recover, let's not just go back to normal. Let's go back to the normal things which were really good, and let's avoid the things which were bad and improve. Let's build back better, and let's rethink our future and how we follow our dreams, and let's do that in a smarter and more sustainable way. And let's do that with the leadership of business. And so we're putting together some of the most interesting leaders, business leaders in this country, who will sign a collective manifesto saying, we believe in climate change, we believe in the imperative to do something about it, we believe in sustainable development, we believe in a whole range of different important sustainability imperatives, which we collectively will sign up to very strong commitments that we will stand up as exemplars so that others can follow us. And then we will encourage our customers to do as we're doing as we move forward. So suppliers, customers, consumers, everybody will be brought in to do this. And that this will be the private sector, through some of the most powerful business leaders in this country, from some of the largest companies in this country, some which may be even surprising to the population, that they will stand up and say, we need to act on climate change, we need to act on a whole number of things. And this isn't just about talk, but here are concrete actions that we are taking that you can clearly see, and we want to advocate other people do it. That's what Project Rethink is about. I think it's a major opportunity because, for me, the biggest and most exciting reason for doing this is that the Czech Republic, I'm a foreigner, but I've lived here for 15 years. The Czech Republic is a much greater country than people in this country sometimes realize. It's not a small country in a European context, it's a mid-sized country. But it's a country with a great legacy, a great intellectual legacy that comes from the First Republic, an engineering leader, an innovative leader, a thought leader in the world in the 1920s and 1930s, which was rudely interrupted by the Second World War and then never came back. 1989 was that opportunity, but now is the real opportunity through sustainable development for this country with its business leaders and with successful private sector to actually stand up and say, let's make this country a center of excellence, not just in Europe, but in the world, so that we can be seen as a center of excellence for sustainable development, so that we can lead in thinking and by examples of the work that we're doing as the private sector, we can lead the way into a much more exciting new future as we emerge from this horrible pandemic.
Well, I can declare on behalf of the Czech Infrastructure Association that we will be really delighted to support you and share your inspiration to the infrastructure sector. And we believe that our infrastructure in the future is going to be prepared, designed in the more sustainable way. And Jonathan, thank you very much for being here. It was a great time, and I hope that we will meet in a year time maybe and discuss the opportunities and the successes in the future. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to us cooperating together.